Hi guys, in today's Synth Secrets, we're cooking up a jump up bass patch along the stylistic lines of artists like Amplify, Upgrade, or even more recent offerings from Chase and Status. We're gonna make this. We're using UE's Zebra 2, it's very deep and allows us to take sharp turns in sound design as we add different synthesis elements and processing. And really, this tutorial will barely scratch the surface of what Zebra can do. Zebra's unparalleled approach to warping waveforms makes it capable of producing a broad spectrum of really in-your-face tones. And the Performer mode gives you producer instant access to real-time control. That's hard to match with other synths, hardware or software. We're giving the Ableton project away, it's in the description below so you can follow along, and you can grab Zebra for free, there's a link below for that too. But as much as we love Zebra, you should be able to use these techniques with other soft synths. Let's get into it. To get started, let's initialize the patch from the preset selector, then head to the global settings at the bottom left and set the voicing mode to legato. Now set glide to about 9 o'clock. Now select Oscillator 1 tab on the bottom and pick the first wavetable you see, entitled Bell's Flipper. It's got those funky harmonics that will help us get where we need with this patch. Head to the Oscillator 1 module at the top left and set the tune to 24. That will move the pitch 2 octaves up. We're setting it so high because we're using it as an FM modulator rather than as the main tone. You're not going to end up hearing Oscillator 1 directly. The carrier, the main bass tone, will be produced by an FM oscillator which we will create in a moment. Now let's give it a little volume contour by adding some attack and release to envelope 1. Moving on, in the main grid in the center of the interface, click on an empty cell beneath the one currently labeled Oscillator 1. Select FMO1 from the list of options. This gives you a new frequency modulation oscillator. In Zebra, signal flows from the top to the bottom of the grid, and adding an FMO downstream for another oscillator makes the FMO the carrier, that is, the main tone, and sets the upstream oscillator up as a modulator, something that simply affects the FMO rather than making its own sound. By default, FMO1 is just playing a deep sine wave, which you should be able to hear. If you can't, grab some headphones. The FM knob is set to 0. That means there's no frequency modulation going on. Oscillator 1 isn't doing anything at all right now because its only job is to modulate FMO1. You could turn the FM knob up to get a little static value, but that's not what we want. We're going to modulate the FM amount using an envelope generator. So click on the Matrix tab to grab the mod matrix. Now click on the field under the SRC knob and select envelope 2. Turn the SRC knob to just over 2 o'clock. Now click and drag the target field to the FM knob on FMO1. We're now getting that nasty buzz, which is what we want. But if you head to envelope 2, turn the attack up to around 9 or 10 o'clock, and something similar on the release, just to remove some of that front edge a little bit. Of course, if you want to keep it, no need to touch the attack and release. Great, we've got a very basic FM bass. Remember that Oscillator 1's tune setting is set to 24, so it's 2 octaves higher than the FMO1, the oscillator it's modulating. While the MIDI is looping, let's experiment with different Oscillator 1 tune settings. Let's bring in the drums. You'll find that setting it to 0, 12, 24, 36 and 48 all yield great and usable tones with different harmonic sets. So we're going to make it really easy to switch between those values. That way you can change up the tone of the bass easily to add variation through your track. We're going to use Zebra's performance features. Click on the XY1 tab towards the bottom. Click and drag the first empty slot to Oscillator 1's tune knob to set the modulation target, so modulation source X1 is set to Oscillator 1 tune. Now this is really key. click and drag the little triangles, Yuri calls these limit markers, to the edges of the grey part of the range bar, and as you drag the triangles, you'll see the value changing in the main display at the top centre. You need those little triangles to read exactly -24 and 24. It's a bit fiddly, but stick with it. When done correctly, we can turn X1's knob all the way to the left or right to get really usable tones. And if we double click on the X1 knob to set it back to 0, that's another really usable tone. As an added bonus, you can set the X1's value to -50 or 50 and it lands on great sounds. We have 5 bass tones in this one patch. We've done all this setup on our end and we've set some modulation for the X1 knob so we can hear all the options that we've got at our fingertips. Let's check it out. Now we've got the basic sound and a bunch of useful variations, that's great, but Zebra could do so much more. Its unique power is warping sounds all the way down to the oscillator level, so let's do a bit of that. Head over to the Oscillator 1 module and click on the Oscillator Effects tab on the right side. In the first empty slot, select Scrambler. Now as the MIDI is looping, move this knob around. If you change values while notes are sounding, you kind of get a cool gritty thing. And if you just leave the knob static on any value other than 0, you'll just have another cool bass tone. Let's take a listen to what it can sound like if we jump around a bit. It's definitely more subtle than some of the moves we made earlier, but it's a nice flavour nonetheless. Here's the automation that we've done on it, and as I say, it's a little bit more subtle, but it's adding that certain something. Now it's time for the filter. Let's choose an empty slot in the main grid beneath FMO1 and select VCF1. We're going to turn the cutoff way down and open up the mod matrix again and route envelope 3 to the filter cutoff frequency. Let's adjust the envelope to get something a lot darker than what we had previously. And now let's add distortion. Add shape 1 to an empty slot below our other modules. Change the type to wedge. Push the input gain to 2 or 3 o'clock and push the depth up to halfway or more. Using that aggressive distortion, saturation or wave shaper effect after a low pass filter that just barely opens enough to engage the distortion gives off a certain vibe. Now let's look at the whole patch we're working on and pay special attention to the settings of VCF1, Shape 1 and Envelope 3. For the icing on the cake, we're just going to add a couple of effects. So we're going to add reverb, add a bit of wet, increase the wet, bit of size, add a bit of tone. Let's add some compression. Done. Just dial in a bit of release. Make sure this is on strong. you can increase the output. And then some EQ. Let's bring it down around in the muddy area, around 350. Let's boost it around 3K. Let's turn it up a little bit in our cans. But that's more or less it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any suggestions of tracks or ideas you'd like to learn, just drop a comment. We'll do our very best to help you out. Don't forget you can download the session and you can download Zebra if you want to follow along. See you next time.